Welcome to the G5 Hive, our next installment of our Worker Bee series, where we deep dive into the G5 college football landscape with the folks that know the teams the best. If you're watching us on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. And if you're listening to us in podcast form, please rate and review. Today, we'll be taking a look at the San Diego State Aztecs, who finished 4-8 last season. They wrapped up their 2024 spring practice with their spring game on April 20th. We have a special guest joining us today. He is a teacher, he is a writer and content creator for East Village Times, where he covers the San Diego State Aztecs. He is Paul Garrison. Paul can be found at Padre de Cuatro on X. Welcome to the show, Paul.
Thank you. Man, what a great video, great intro. It's exciting, man.
Well, speaking of Sean Lewis, San Diego State's head coach Brady Hoke retires. In comes Sean Lewis. He was previously the offensive coordinator at Colorado. Before that, he was the head coach at Kent State. What can you tell us about Coach Lewis and what he brings to the table for the Aztecs on and off the field?
Well, I think the biggest maybe kind of contrast between him and Coach Hoke, Coach Long before that, is kind of their philosophies on the field, right? The way in which the former philosophies was they were going to eat the clock, play sound defense, try to win the game in the fourth quarter. And they were very successful with it. And I think that there is a question of if are they kind of throwing out the baby with the bathwater by being as successful, more successful than they've ever been at the Division I level for the last 15 years. And the reality is Sean Lewis is very similar to Brady Hoke, to Rocky Long, in terms of their philosophy, in terms of their physicality, in terms of the things that they value in the way that they want to develop people and do things from, the high school ranks up and et cetera. So I think there's a lot of commonality that way. But I think what Sean Lewis has done is he's really energized the fan base. But what Sean Lewis has really done is he has brought kind of a PR mindset that was lacking from the previous head coaches, and he has brought that to the university. And so like his ability and his way of being able to get out in front of the media, get out in front of the fans, share the exciting message of what San Diego State football, what the vision is, I think that's what he's done. And then I think, San Diego State has a long history of offensive first football. And I think fans are very excited about that possibility again. Even when San Diego State was, finishing in the top 25, they were getting, the NCAA's all-time leading rusher, Donnell Pumphrey, was on the Mesa. The crowds weren't what you would expect them to be. But when they had balanced offenses, when they were able to pass the ball, there were times, my dad tells me, who was an alumni of San Diego State back in the 70s, they were outdrawing the Chargers because Don Coryell was the coach and they were throwing the ball all over the place and people were excited about it. So I think they're trying to take the best of Rocky Long and the best of Brady Hoke in terms of their philosophy, in terms of who they are, in terms of how they want to develop people and give these student athletes a great experience at San Diego State, while also having the sides that they lack, which was that connection with the fans, because they have an exciting offense and more of to that modern feel that people look at when they see college football around the country. For many years, it seems like San Diego State was kind of like in a time lapse.
Well, speaking of exciting offenses, can you describe the type of offense that Coach Lewis plans to run there at San Diego State for folks that might not be familiar with Coach Lewis? I think the term is what, Aztec Fast. Is that what they're calling it?
Yeah, and they had whatever they had, Buffalo Fast, and then they had the Flash offense at Kent State. So it's not a new moniker; it's what he does, what Sean Lewis does. So I think what they're going to try to do is they're going to spread out the field, and they're going to try to win the numbers game like all spread offenses, right? They're going to try to make the defense have to kind of commit at the line, and they're going to try to play the numbers wherever those are. I think one of the aspects that is a little bit unique, if you remember the offenses that Baylor used to run, that's really where the tree is, and that's the roots of where that is. Lanier Sampson, who's their wide receivers coach, was a wide receiver at Baylor, so he's been in the system, had huge success down in Texas for them. And so what they're going to try to do is they're going to try to be able to vary their tempo, change formations like crazy, but all with the same personnel. So the defense will not have time to be able to run new people onto the field. And the idea is that it does a couple of things. One, it forces the defense to play vanilla, because if they're going to have so many, you're not going to be able to do a bunch of blitzes because you don't know what they're going to line up in the next scheme, and they're going to snap it like this. So that's one aspect of it. I think another aspect of it is there's just mistakes that are made. People, in that processing time, the offense should have an advantage over the defense always in being able to set what's happening. And if you're snapping the ball quicker, there's more likely there's going to be an assignment error. There's going to be those things that take place. I think the other piece of it that is a little bit of if you look back at those, a little bit of a people mischaracterize it and misunderstand it. This is not a pass first offense. They at Kent State and back at Baylor, they ran the ball more than they passed it. And their yards were the same because they're going to try to get over the top. They're going to try to take their shots there. That's a big piece of this. Aztec Fast is not just because they snap the ball quickly, but they have put an emphasis on speed on both sides of the ball. And as far as the offense, which is what you're asking about, that's what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to, their tight end is really the big key to all of it. If they have two of them, they can even play them with two as long as they can kind of split them out and see how that would work. But that tight end offers them the opportunity if he's versatile enough to be an H-back, and now he's kind of doing a lead blocking thing. They're going to stack him outside, and he's going to hit the seam. And if he has that ability, if they don't cover him with the linebacker or something like that. But obviously that sets up the screen game, it sets up the run game. There's so much variety that comes with it if the tight end can be versatile. And I think at the end of the day, that's really the position to pay attention to as much as anything else if you're trying to get that in-depth look at it. But I think that's what they're trying to do. I think the flip side of it is I think there's been an evolution, and Coach Lewis at least has been talking about, making the offense that they've been running at Kent State, then at Colorado, making it uniquely San Diego State's. And I think one of the things that you're going to see that might be a little bit different is the variety of tempos that they play with. If they have the ability to come up to the line really quick and pause and milk the clock if they want to, they can play at different speeds, and that can be sometimes just as effective as anything else. And so how all of that stuff blends together with an underclassman signal caller is your guess is as good as mine. We're going to obviously break that down, but in its basics, that's what it is. It spreads everybody out, forces the defense to play really vanilla, which means what you're getting on defense, so you can scheme your offense, and it actually looks like the college football game because they're playing the way you expect them to, and the scheme works and the fit and all that stuff. For the quarterback, it's very much in the modern system of just I got 1-2 reads, and if the ball isn't there, I'm going to tuck it on this play. Maybe I'll get to a third and 3, occasionally 4, and even less 5, and we go. RPOs is part of it. Bubble screens is part of it. Running the football, physicality, being able to move the chains that way is really honestly, I think, where it starts. And so people expecting, this to be thrown all over the place, which is the exciting part. I think they want to get big chunks on the ground as well.
Well, let's get to the position where it all starts on offense, and that's the quarterback. 2023 starter Jalen Maiden has graduated. They brought in A.J. Duffy from Florida State in the winter. That quarterback room is young heading into 2024. How do the quarterbacks look in the spring?
It's interesting because I think the biggest piece in all these questions, and I apologize, this is just where we're at. Coach Lewis talks about that they're at 65% of where they want to be. And that's kind of intentional with how they build up and ramp up towards fall camp. At the beginning of spring, we asked him, "Hey, when do you want to name a quarterback, starting quarterback?" And he said, "Oh, by the end of spring." It came and went, and they kind of backed off of that, and they said, "Well, you know what? If we're going to name a starter, we want to make sure that they're playing at the full speed of what we want, so we can actually make a proper evaluation." And so AJ Duffy, as you mentioned, has been kind of the assumed starter. He's taken all the first reps. He looked really good in the spring game, looked the most in control. But the question still remains that, if he had the goal, Sean Lewis had the goal of announcing a starter in spring, what did AJ Duffy not do that made them wait and pause. So I think there's a lot of there are 3 other scholarship quarterbacks, all of them young, who have a chance. Danny O'Neal, who was one of the media darlings because he was committed to Lewis and Deion Sanders at Colorado, followed him to San Diego State, came in as an early enrollee, and he was up one. They have him as Orr listed on the depth chart. And the idea, I would imagine, is you have a true freshman who should have been in high school still, right, going to his prom, that sort of stuff, and he's able to be close enough to AJ Duffy, who's this is his 3rd year in college. Like, wouldn't you expect now going into the start of spring, which is on Thursday, that O'Neal's going to be further along than he was when he was just a freshman, and now he's got his legs under him, and he's got the offense and all that kind of stuff. Then they got a guy, Kyle Crum, who is he's got a little bit of time as a freshman. He kind of been pushing around. Jalen Maiden is pushing and trying to get those starting things. He's very much in the mix. He feels like they had a good summer and they're ready to kind of have that competition. He went to a local Southern California school, Norco, and they play in the same division as, I'm going to say I think it's Centennial High School, which is a perennial top 15, top 25 school in the country. And they had this like long history of just winning every game in that division because they're just head and shoulders above them. And Kyle Crum led Norco to a victory, and it was like such a big deal. They have this like celebration where they jump into a pool, and like the principal of the school jumped into the pool with them to celebrate it. Then another one, another guy, Javance Johnson, who I'm not getting his name right. There's a hyphen in there that he's added that I have a hard time pronouncing. But he went to Chaminade High School. He's the biggest of them, has the biggest arm of them, has advanced kind of passing stuff. If you're going and you're saying, well, who's the guy if you were looking at him and saying, who's the guy, it's him. And it's, I think he's still trying to have, his mind catch up to where his arm, but I think there's a lot of possibilities. But AJ Duffy has been the guy. And so it'd be really hard to imagine something different. But if they're really truly only at 65%, then it's got to be wide open, because whoever can run it at that speed consistently is going to be able to separate them here at the beginning.
Well, moving over to the running game, the running back room looks really deep going into the year. They returned their top 4 rushers from a year ago, and Jalen Armstead, Keenan Christon, Cam Davis, and Lucky Sutton. And then they added Marquez Cooper after the spring, who's familiar with Coach Lewis. He played for Coach Lewis there at Kent State. But for the guys that were there in the spring, how did those guys look?
It's interesting. They're, again, just like we just talked about with Javance, they all look the part, with the exception of Cam Davis. Cam Davis is the only one who's a little bit undersized, but he is super quick, super fast, like was involved in their kick return game, like that kind of guy. They look great. The reality, though, is all 4 of those guys to date have underperformed. Lucky Sutton, who you mentioned, was a 4-star recruit coming in, a local kid who went nuts in the state playoffs, leading one of the local schools, Cathedral Catholic, to the state title. And it was like one of those rare where he was a 3-star and he was so good in the state finals that they had to give him a 4-star, that kind of thing. He is an unbelievable athlete. He's caught passes in like 7-on-7, and 7-on-7 you can't run away from anybody because you just have to touch him. Well, he still did, and he looks like a tight end. Dude is huge, but he runs tall, does a lot of and makes way too much contact with the way that he runs because he is so big. And then he also just has lacked the vision and maybe a little bit of that wiggle to kind of make people miss. He did have some really long runs, Utah State, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. People have been excited about him. Cam Davis, again, we mentioned him. Again, it flashes. He's smaller, does have that escapability, but hasn't fully been able to put it all together. Jalen Armstead is a guy who they've talked about every year. But I mean, I'm at San Jose State, and I think he had close to 140 yards. And I'm asking, Coach Hoke, I'm saying, hey man, why now? Like, why did it all come together? Was it the weather? Because it was kind of rainy, whatever. And he was just talking about how, I had to talk with him about making sure he gets his pads in front of him. And I'm thinking, man, this guy's played so much football, and you're still having to talk about getting your pads in front of him. He's huge, can run, has the ability to make guys miss, has all of the things that you could want in this offense. And then there's Keenan Christian, who, USC guy, track guy, elite speed. Every person who's playing the Aztecs in EA Sports is using him because he's their fastest guy at a 98. And he's all of those things. He's all of those things. There was a bowl game a couple of years ago where he caught swing passes and it was like gone. And so he's that big play guy. And I think Sean Lewis, who loves speed, I think he's going to want to be the coach to finally unlock him. I think everybody has wanted to be that guy. Got reps early at USC, had some production, but he just hasn't quite put it together. I think they were trying to make him an inside runner and be a tougher runner last year. And I think he did that, but he still has the issue where he just doesn't make guys miss. Like, you can be as fast as you possibly can, but if you're one-on-one within the hole, all that space is gone and you're not going to be able to go. And so they all look the part. They can all catch the ball. Every one of them has good hands, which is another good component to Sean Lewis's offense that, they're going to be looking to try to exploit, maybe some two-back stuff, be able to bring two of them on there and use those skills and things like that. But the reality is it's an underperforming group. The Aztecs have had subpar years from their perspective after going 12-2. And they rebuilt their offense to give the rock to their running backs, which is their deepest room, their best room. And you mentioned having all of that, the stats back. Well, they're not great. I mean, the bottom line is that they're just not, and they had plenty of opportunity. And so I think they went out and got Marquez Cooper, who is the NCAA's active leading rusher. And he's had 3 consecutive 1,000-yard seasons. He started as an 18-year-old for Sean Lewis, came into camp early. He was only 17 years old when he started college. So he's actually pretty young, even though he's played all of these years. Had, the 240 plus, 280 plus carries the last 2 years he was at Kent State. He's listed as an OR with Keenan Christian at the top of the depth chart. If those other guys who are remaining are going to be able to take a significant amount of carries away from Marquez Cooper, they're better. And talking to Marquez in June, he said this is the best group that he's ever been around, most talented, to your point of how you asked the question at the beginning. But it's time, especially for those guys at the top who are older, and it's kind of put up or shut up time. And they're, their NFL futures, hinge on what they can do this year and if they can separate themselves. And same thing with Marquez Cooper. I mean, he has all the production in the world, but he does not have the measurables. And, how he takes that and where he goes at this level is going to be a big deal.
Well, the Aztecs wide receiver room will look a little bit different here in 2024. Mekhi Shaw, Balin Brooks, Felipe Wesley II, among others, return, but there are some new faces that come in from the portal. You got Lewis Brown comes in from Colorado State. Nate Bennett comes in from Portland State. You got Jerry McClure from UCLA. And then Jashawn Polk reuniting with Coach Lewis too. How did this room look in the spring?
Inconsistent. It would be the way that I would say that it looked. Jashawn Polk and Mekhi Shaw were maybe the exceptions to that. They were the guys who I think separated themselves the most. And I think that means that there's going to be opportunities for the other guys. They haven't been able. One really important aspect of Sean Lewis's offense is finding somebody who can take the top off the ball. They not only want defenses to cover them sideline to sideline. They want them to cover them for 60 yards. So, and then be able to find all the stuff that's in between all that. But that only works if you have a legit deep threat. And so Lewis Brown, he's going to get a shot to be that guy. Jashawn Polk a little bit, but he played more of that role in the slot. I think that they're looking to find that guy. You mentioned that the transfer from Portland. You mentioned his name. Well, I lost it.
Nate Bennett.
Nate Bennett. Thank you, Nate. Nice kid. Big, very. But he's coming up from an FCS school. Does he have the ability to play? What role does he look at? Does he slot in at? Jerry McClure is young. I mean, I think the interesting part about McClure is he's still a freshman. So he competed at there. Dude's a specimen. That guy is a track star. He's big. He's everything. He would fit as that guy, but does he have the maturity to be able to do it? We mentioned Lewis Brown. He does have some production. Obviously, probably the most famous game, that he played when at Colorado State when they played Colorado, and he's doing the celebration with the wrist, and doing all that stuff. So it's going to be different, but I think it's going to be Mekhi Shaw. I think it's going to be Jay Sean Polk, and then they have a stable of young guys that. I think what this offense is designed to do is to give one-on-one stuff. So they got a freshman 6'4", Will Cianfreni. He is a Texas transplant, but he came out here and played with Julian Sayin, who I think is at Ohio State now, right? He went to Alabama, then to Ohio State. So he wanted to come out here and play with him as a wide receiver. And this guy, like I said, he's 6'4", and he has more publicity doing like huge basketball dunks than he does like the stuff as being a wide receiver. The guy can get up, and he's going to have one-on-one opportunities against smaller guys and things like that. So he's somebody that might, be somebody who has that, because, the younger, the further you are away from the ball, the easier it is to be able to make a play. Heath McRee is another guy. He's from Texas, just a flat out speedster. Every play, he just, got over the top. Ben Scolari is a guy from Nevada who kind of is an in-between of all of those guys, big frame. So I think there's going to be a lot of competition there. And they're going to figure it out with the chemistry and stuff like that. But the part that they didn't quite get to in spring camp is that deep threat. Deep threat wasn't there. And so the quarterback that's able to throw that ball, the receiver that's able to go and dominate in the air on those one-on-one matchups, they're going to be the guys who are going to play. Balen Brooks, as you mentioned, he's a big guy, not like top end speed, but good enough speed, good hands, really smooth, polished route runner. Philippe Wesley's a talented guy. And he flashed in moments last time, but not like that, not as you expected, but he kind of had some injuries and ways back in spring camp. So a lot of possibilities, and honestly, the comment could be made throughout the roster. There's a lot of solid guys. Like, I don't think there's a bunch of huge holes. I think they did a really good job of plugging in dudes who can play at this level all throughout the roster. It's clear they got a bunch of Robins. I don't know who their Batman is. And that's really what fall camp is going to be. Is who's the guy? Who are the players that everybody else can kind of slot in around and the other people are scared of? And who is that in the wide receiver room? I don't know, but I will say that Jay Sean Polk, if this was last year when we were having this conversation, and instead of going to West Virginia, he went to San Diego State, you would say, oh, this is one of the biggest G5 guys producing and all those kinds of things. So I think he's really exciting. He's healthy. He did the whole spring practice. They did some precautionary stuff just because of the injury, but he was a full participant. So I think he's somebody who's really exciting. And Mekhi Shaw, as we mentioned, he has athleticism that you don't really expect. He was a former walk-on who kind of, is a great story, local kid. But you watch him run around, you're like, dude, that guy's fast. Oh, that guy's wiry, strong. Okay. He doesn't look it. Sincerely, you would walk around and you're like, you're a football player. He's like a biology major. You're like, okay, that fits better. But yet he just produces. So lots of pieces. I don't know who if they have somebody who's just like a stud that is going to force everybody to play honest and all of those things.
Do they have anybody lining up on the outside or in that X position in the spring pretty consistently?
Yeah, that would be Bennett, Brown, Mekhi Shaw, McClure, Balen Brooks. Those guys were all there. One guy that's really fun that we didn't talk about is there's a guy who came in as a safety, and they ran out of receivers last year, so he slid over as a true freshman, and he's stuck though, and he's been playing that slot position behind Jay Sean Polk, and I should have my roster in front of me. I don't, but he's a really exciting guy, very fast, very big, very physical, who could factor in this as well.
Well, when we were talking about the offense, you kind of described how the tight ends are utilized in this offense, but let's kind of like talk about the tight ends from a personnel perspective. That room's going to look very different here in 2024. Mark Redmond was second on the team in receiving yards, touchdown reception, and routes run last year. He's off to Louisville. Jay Rudolph is off to Sacramento State, and Cameron Harpole is off to Arizona State.
Right.
That leaves Logan Tanner as the top returner. But, you know, they brought in some guys from the portal. They brought in Jude Wolf coming over from USC, who was there for the spring. And then post-spring, they bring in Michael Harrison from Colorado. What can we expect from this group here in 2024?
You know, I think so. The guy I was talking about was Jordan Napier. Yeah, that's the wide receiver. You know, 6'2", 200 pounds, can run like the wind, and they had him lining up in the slot, which, you know, could be pretty good from that position. But from the tight end position, you know, it's really interesting. San Diego State has kind of developed, you know, a little bit of a tight end reputation. You know, Dan Bellinger most recently going into the NFL, but they have other guys. David Wells is still doing his thing. Collie Waring was a high pick. Late Gavin Escobar, he was a high pick. They've had tight ends, you know, kind of going through a little bit of a factory, and so they had a lot of high end guys. You mentioned Mark Redmond. He was a transfer, had Alabama offers coming out of high school, went to Washington, didn't really do too much there, came over and he was good. He was good, but he just didn't offer the physicality that they needed for that offense. And I don't know if the offense that they had really suited him because of that. They really needed a guy like Dan Bellinger who could really, you know, be there. And so it's interesting, man. This is the most fun position as a football nerd. This is the most fun position to be able to pay attention to if you follow San Diego State. And even if you don't, but you like football, this is it. The caliber of athlete that Sean Lewis has access to at San Diego State compared to what he had at Kent State is almost like the difference between a high FCS and a low FCS. There are FCS schools that are better positioned, in my opinion, to be able to be successful than the FBS Kent State that with just the facility and the athletes that they got. So some of the guys who played tight end were fullbacks. Like they had literally next to no ability whatsoever to be able to catch the football. They just were not a threat at all. And then they had other guys who were like thinner, but they didn't really block. And he just utilized whatever skills that were there. And so a perfect example of that is Mikey Harrison, who was a walk-on at Colorado, gets his degree there. Sean Lewis, he has 30 catches last year, which is very substantial for anyone, but for a tight end position especially. And they give him a scholarship. He's here now, but he's like 6'3". I think he was listed at 205 over there. He's listed at 220 now. I'd be curious to see if that's like one of those, you know, make you look better kind of things. But he was essentially a slow wide receiver who played the tight end position and offered all that multiplicity in terms of how they like did all of the different formations and stuff like that we talked about at the beginning. So he's somebody who's really exciting, and it'll be interesting to see how that works, you know, and if they have kind of that tweener guy who doesn't completely fit. Jude Wolf looks like an NFL guy. Dan Bellinger was here, as we talked about, and Dan Bellinger is just a specimen. He's a guy who you walk into the room and you go, oh, okay, that guy's going to play professional football, right? The only thing about Dan Bellinger is he's a nicer guy than he's a good football player. You know what I mean? It's just, that's like the kind of it. But Jude Wolf, he is just a stud. His issue is just he's been injured. I mean, he's been injured a lot, often, and it's going to be a question of can he stay healthy this year? And then they got a guy, Logan Tanner, who is again another guy. He's young. He's about 6'3". So if he was 6'5", if he was 6'5", he would be in the SEC. And he's from Texas, had interest from some of these other schools and things like that. But he came to San Diego State. He was a pass first guy, has put on a little weight, probably not enough weight. But he could also be somebody who, for the first time, gives Sean Lewis a tight end who can be really good in the passing game, who can play the tight end, who can play on the line as the H-back. You can split him out and do all the things to kind of give Sean Lewis like his full creativity. And so what's interesting about it is as great as it was at Kent State, they were limited by the kind of tight end that they had. They made it work. It was great, but there's an element that could be even better. And they didn't have it at Colorado either, where this guy who can maul people on the line, open up holes for running backs, but also force you to try to cover him with a safety or some sort of matchup problem. And if Wolf, Tanner, or if Mikey Harrison in his second year in this system figures out how to block maybe a little bit better, it could actually add a component that has never really existed in Sean Lewis's offense.
Do you think we'll see a rotation of those three guys, or do you think Jude Wolf's probably kind of getting the majority of the carries, the other two are kind of chipping in here and there? Or
I think a lot of that, I don't know. I mean, that's the simple answer. There were times when we were at practice that they had two tight ends in the game. They were practicing two tight end sets, so it wouldn't shock me to see multiple tight ends at the same time. I think a lot of that has to do with health permitting, right?
Sure.
And then I think that, what they're going to try to do is, if their best skill position players, we talked about, there's a lot of Robins at the wide receiver position, but is there a Batman? Well, if you got two Batmans at the tight end position, they're both going to play. And then after that, how they do all their rotations and things like that is one of the things to see, because one of the big keys is they do not want to substitute on offense. Every time that they substitute, that's a win for the defense, because the defense gets to match personnel. They get to bring in fresh bodies. So, if they are going to sub in, it's going to be like possession by possession. But I think right now, they've been really happy with Jude Wolf. He was their representative at Mountain West Media Days in Las Vegas. And he looks the part. And so I think if he's healthy, that's probably the guy. With, sprinkling in the other guys as well.
All right, let's talk about this O-line. They bring back 3 of their 5 guys from that line in 2023. You bring back the center. You bring back Miru, played right guard and right tackle. And then you got Abdullah. He played both guard positions as well. And then there were 8 guys who transferred out of this room, but Lewis brings back 4 guys in via the portal. You got Nate Williams that comes in from Atkins. Bryant comes in from North Dakota, I believe. And then after the spring, you bring in Bajorn from Arizona. What are your expectations for this O-line in 2024?
Again, another just really interesting thing, because we're going to talk about expectations, I'm sure, for what the season is, whenever that comes up. But one of the interesting parts is, as much like change as San Diego State has had, you guys know this probably better than I do, all the teams on their schedule are experiencing tons of change. I mean, that's just normal in football now. And so I think 5 years ago, if San Diego State had this much change, you go, oh man, are they going to be able to gel? Are they going to be able to do the things? But I think every year, the teams that figure out how to gel, because the days of having an offensive line who have been together for 4 years and now they're ready to hit their stride, I don't think is going to happen. I mean, San Diego State, it's interesting that their offensive lines have not been like the strengths of their teams in terms of just like what you would think they would in their history. I mean, in 2021, they were dominant along their offensive line, but in 2022 and 2023, it was less so. But even with that, they lost Josh Simmons, who I think is a dark horse for being a first round pick in the NFL draft in the upcoming year, transferred to Ohio State. They got Brandon Crenshaw Dixon, who Florida reached out to, and it picked him up. They got Cade Bennett, who's over at TCU, that went, and these are high level places. Even a backup, Tommy Marabella, got a really good offer, and is I think he may have went somewhere else for the degree that he's going after, but got some like looks from the Power 5 conferences. And so San Diego State, for everything that the line has been kind of like the ire of everybody the last couple of years, but yet these guys go and they're getting big NIL deals. They're moving to these Power 5 conferences. And so what do you expect coming back? I mean, the thing I think that you would expect is Miles Morale and Ross Ulugalu-Masuli. Those 2 guys were injured during spring camp. And because they were injured, minor surgeries that they were working their way back, they didn't really practice. But they're slated to be the starters. And if those 2 guys can play really, really well, their interior line could be really good, because in Ulugalu-Masuli's absence, Braden Bryant, the transfer from North Dakota, has played a fantastic center. And he really looks like he's solidified that position, and he's allowed Ulugalu Masuli to slide back to guard, which is where he played before last year. And he was kind of rushed in there because their centers just couldn't snap the ball. Like, it was this weird thing at the early part of practice. And so he kind of was forced to play that role, did well there, but he's more of a guard. And then, so now you're saying, okay, well, if you have the interior of your line and you got three seniors, right? Guys who've played a good amount of football, and they're in the middle of your line. Morale went to Washington. I think he was like the number 2 overall center coming out of high school. He went to Mater Dei Santa Ana, the big, national school. So, I mean, these are guys with big pedigree. And if you have those guys in the middle of your line with the numbers game that they play, just those 3 guys by themselves can be huge, creating pockets, things of that nature. On the outside, it's so interesting. You mentioned Dean Abdullah. He started 7 games, I believe, a year ago, but he was just fine in all of them. And his place on the line is a little bit unsure. He doesn't quite have the size to play inside, but he also doesn't quite have the athleticism to play on the edge. So he is, I think, looking for a backup role. Nate Williams has played a ton of football, most recently for Akron. And he came in, he was the right tackle. He's been the right tackle. Probably with his age and experience could slide over, but doesn't have the athleticism to play left tackle. So Christian Jones, who is a 6'9" giant human being guy, he started the first, I want to say, 6 games last year, and then was replaced by Drew Azapardi, who has since transferred to Washington. Right, a lot of moving pieces. But Christian Jones is back. But then, as you said, Arizona, they one of their guys who was in the mix to be their starter. Not, maybe not. Some people say he wasn't winning it, but he was getting first team reps and all that kind of stuff. So, good summer, and you're the starter at Arizona. Started their bowl game. Joe Borjon, he is an insanely big guy. He's 6'8". He everywhere he goes, there he casts a shadow. I mean, he's one of those kind of guys. Really athletic, can bend, can do everything, and he's been the guy that they think is going to be there at left tackle. But the question is, he went to junior college, and the question is, why hasn't he produced when he has so many great measurables? And so they're going to try to figure that out here in fall camp. But they got a whole bunch of age and guys who've played a lot of snaps. So if anybody could figure out how to gel and figure this out, you would assume it could be I think they're going to have, I'd have to look at it again, but I think it's 5 seniors. Like maybe Borjon's a junior. So 5 seniors and a redshirt junior. So if you expect somebody to be able to do it, it's them. And I would say it's the new way of college football for G5 schools and maybe even P5 schools too, where again, you're not going to get time. You produce or you're done. And so I think that it's kind of the first time in a lot of positions that you're seeing it for San Diego State on the field, because it hasn't really hit them before. They had guys that they were kind of grooming and bringing up, and they had some loyalty to the staff and things of that nature. But I don't think it's that weird across the country anymore to have replacements on this and trying to figure it out and trying to piece those things together in one year. And effectively the coaches who are better not at necessarily developing somebody over 3 to 5 years, but who can take somebody at the beginning of fall camp to be at this level, at the end of fall camp to be at that level. These are the coaches who are going to start making millions of dollars, much more than the guys who are going to take a 3-star and turn them into an NFL in 5 years. And so that shift is playing out in front of our eyes at San Diego State.
All right, Paul, if you have to pick an offensive player to have a breakout type season in 2024, who are you going to pick?
A breakout. So I can't say Marquez Cooper, right? Because he has 3,000-yard seasons. That wouldn't be a breakout. Like, we know him. He's a Maxwell on the Maxwell list. Like, it's not fair. All right.
Yeah.
I know it'd be cheating. That's like completely the safe pick. I'm going to go AJ Duffy. And I know, again, that's another safe pick because he's the quarterback in Sean Lewis's system. He's going to have so many. I think he'll be the starter. I think he's going to get the reps in terms of, they snap the ball a whole bunch. And I think that while he's not going to be as good as he's going to be next year in this offense, I think that Sean Lewis and the designs that they have is very QB friendly. And so I would expect him by numbers wise to be an all conference QB because he's going to get, more opportunities. So I'll go with him. If it's also cheating to take the quarterback, another guy that I would throw out there, who I think is going to have a pretty big year, is Mekhi Shaw. He's a senior, played lots of football, does it the right way, an unbelievable worker, has had steady production, but just hasn't quite had the opportunities. And I think that those opportunities are going to present themselves both as a wide receiver and as a punt returner. So I'll give you him as well. That is a little bit less cliche and easy.
All great choices for sure. If you're watching on YouTube, please hit that like and subscribe button. If you're listening in podcast form, please rate and review on Spotify or Apple Podcasts. Thank you all for your support. And until the next time, we are the G5 Hive.